Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Swenson, and I'm very pleased to serve as your moderator today. This is the first of our Evelyn R. Liblit Scholarship Committee's Waste on Wednesdays seminars. But first, I want to take a few minutes and let you know a little bit about the Liblit Scholarship Committee and what we do. For those who were not fortunate enough to know him, Evan Liblit was a highly respected colleague who passed away at the age of 47 in 1995. In his way too short life, he worked for the EPA, the DEC, the town of Babylon, and a private recycling company. He also found time to teach. In the mid-1970s, while working for EPA in Manhattan, he organized an office paper recycling program for federal buildings. The EPA loaned him to DEC, and in 1997, he was sent to Albany to craft the state's first recycling plan. He also helped form what grew to become the Association of Long Island Recycling Officials. His pioneering efforts and his personality motivated many of us while he was here. After his passing, a number of his colleagues created a scholarship fund at Stony Brook University to continue his legacy. Over the past 22 years, we have provided scholarships to 21 graduate students and 16 undergraduate students. Many have gone on to become leaders in their fields. Our funds are raised at an annual breakfast held each year around America Recycles Day in November and the Federation Solid Waste Conference each May. Unfortunately, the pandemic has put a monkey wrench in our fundraising efforts and events this year. Ironically, however, with the advent of Zoom, this committee has been more active now than ever before. Last year, we held our first symposium at Stony Brook University to a standing room only crowd to address the recycling crisis. This year, we had organized a second symposium to be held in mid-March, just as the pandemic was taking hold. We, like others, were forced to go back to the drawing board, and these Zoom sessions are the result. We have planned 6 of them, and if there's enough interest, we can continue to add topics and sessions. So sponsorships and suggestions for more topics are certainly welcome. In terms of logistics today, we will mute everyone except for the speakers. If you have questions, please enter them into the chat box on your screen, and I will try to group them together and ask them of the speakers at the end of both sessions. Today's session will address the impact of the pending closure of the Brookhaven Landfill. Our speakers are Chris Andrade from the town of Brookhaven and Michael White from the Long Island Regional Planning Council. Chris will speak first. Chris is currently the commissioner for the town of Brookhaven's Department of Recycling and Sustainable Materials Management, better known as the Department of Waste Management. Brookhaven employs a comprehensive solid waste system and effectively manages the waste of 117,000 homes and nearly 500,000 residents. His prior experience included serving as the president of the Islip Resource Recovery Agency and commissioner of the town of Islip Department of Environmental Control. He has nearly 36 years of solid waste management experience, beginning his career in the early 1980s, and he managed the Blydenburg landfill during the late 1980s. He had the opportunity to take part in many local solid waste initiatives, including yard waste composting, recycling collection and processing, MSW landfilling, and waste to energy, as well as multiple capital improvement contracts. He has witnessed or helped manage multiple solid waste crises, including the Islip garbage barge, as well as the recycling downturn of 2018, and most recently, carting contract defaults. He currently lives in Bohemia, is married, and the father of triplet 17-year-old sons. God help him. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you to the Liblit folks for giving me the opportunity to speak on the impacts of the closure of the Brookhaven landfill. And thank you for to my Zoom mates for participating. You know, these, Eric said it, but I'll reiterate, these symposiums give us a great opportunity to speak on topics of relevance. And I think the closure of the Brookhaven landfill is obviously relevant. Before we get started about the Brookhaven landfill, I thought we should talk a little bit about how we got here. I found these pictures when I was doing some research on historical landfill sites, and I found it interesting because 150 years pass and we're still talking about garbage crisis. Years ago, landfills were the heroes, not the zeros. When garbage and manure and food was strewn about the landscape and the streets, aggregating it into one area tend to have some benefit. The history of Long Island landfills is a bit more difficult to uncover. We're all aware of the municipal facilities, the Babylon facility, Islip, Southampton, Brookhaven. 3 of those are currently closed. We're obviously set to close in 2024. But we also know that over the last 75 or 100 years, solid waste and debris was dumped in parks, what's now known as some parks and housing developments or sides of major roadways. It's no secret that developers would oftentimes pick one lucky property and dispose of all their construction debris into a new development into that property. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it was done. This slide just kind of describes the components that go into an engineered landfill. You'd be surprised how many people actually believe that you just dig a hole and bury the garbage. I'm sorry that the detail on this isn't as clear, but we start with 4 inches of compacted subgrade. We put a low permeability soil down. We compact that obviously, and we measure it. On top of that, we put a 60 mil textured geomembrane liner on it, the geocomposite drain, conductors to test for leaks, a geosynthetic clay liner, GCL. On top of that, another 60 mil liner. On top of that, 16 ounce woven textile fabric, 2 feet of soil drainage, and then another 2 feet of protective fill before we begin filling. That's kind of what we call the sandwich that makes the landfill. Obviously, the dirty water that perks through the landfill is called leachate. That's merely a product of exposed acres, rainfall, and how much inventory you have. We currently treat our leachate with a 50% solution of hydrogen peroxide. This helps eliminate odors, and it helps us at the leachate facility, at the waste treatment plant facilities. We collect most of the gas at the landfill. There is 212 various monitoring or gas collection points over 6 phases. There's 3 miles of landfill header pipes ranging in size from 4 inches to 18 inches, and we monitor these systems on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. A little bit about the operations. We have about 90 employees. Talk a little bit about that in a little while. There's about 85 different types of equipment with about 20 pieces of rolling stock, and the remainder are bulldozers, payloaders, grinders, crushers, etc. The landfill provides a household hazardous waste storage facility. It's a permanently permitted storage facility. Residents can come to the landfill and dispose of their household hazardous waste, their waste oil in a environmentally responsible way. We do thousands of gallons of waste oil. There's an area for them to dispose of their rubbish. We're open 6 days a week, 6.5 days a week. Residents can come to the convenience drop-off and dispose of their rubbish. It's Monday through Friday. It's free. There is a cost on Saturday. Again, we've invested over $10 million over 6 or 7 years for maintenance and odor control. We average about 75,000 customer transactions annually. And then I put safety down there. Safety is always a priority for us. We do a hazard assessment each year, and that hazard assessment leads to personal protective equipment being assigned to each employee based on their job titles. That's a little bit about the landfill. I guess we start getting into the real meat and potatoes of what we feel the effects of closing the landfill are. I'm sure there are many more. We just kind of identified 4 areas right here. The first one put down here is environmental, obviously very important. Out of sight, out of mind. That's the mindset that most people who dump illegally have. And besides the cost of cleaning up, you have monitoring expenses, enforcement expenses. We know that dumping illegally oftentimes disrupts the natural order of things. You know, it typically interferes with drainage. Toxins like motor oils and household cleaners and pool chemicals can leach into tributaries, drainage culverts, and even make its way to recharge basins. You know, we always talk about the fact that we live over a sole source aquifer, and protecting our drinking water is always paramount. You know, environmental problems, again, associated with appliances that are illegally dumped. You know, the appliances can release fluorocarbons, and in some cases, depending on the age of the appliances, even PCBs. You know, obviously, illegally dumping endangers wildlife, and it has even been known to cause some fires. So, illegally dumped rubbish, you know, can pose a special threat, special danger to kids who often seem to find their way around in and around junk sites and illegally dumped sites, and they can easily become trapped inside appliances. We've all heard the horrific stories, nightmare stories of children getting trapped in refrigerators and things of that sort. Illegal dumping poses other physical hazards to both kids and adults, especially those adults that are missioned with cleaning up these sites. You know, they're typical cuts, infections, broken bones, sprained limbs, etc. You know, scrap tires always find their way to these illegal dump sites, and scrap tires breed mosquitoes. Mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. We all know that water collects inside tires. Because tires are black, you know, they hold heat, and mosquitoes breed like 100 times faster in warmer water than they do in cooler water. You know, obviously they carry disease. As mentioned previously, illegal dumps create a potential hazard for fire, and these fires can be dangerous to not only the environment, but those living around the community, and especially the first responders that are responsible for putting out those fires. Talk a little bit about disaster relief. You know, I put this slide up because we actually still process some of the organic debris that were generated from some of these storms, going all the way back to Gloria. You know, people tend to overlook the fact that landfills present a controlled environment during disaster relief efforts. You know, over the last 10 years alone, we've had over a dozen storms and hurricanes that generated debris throughout Nassau and Suffolk. And, you know, most of those debris ended up to the Brookhaven landfill. The financial burden on many of those communities were lessened because there was a close disposal option for them. You know, just for instance, Sandy alone, you know, the waste management facility in Brookhaven took over 100,000 tons of stored debris from October 29th to March 31st. And that debris generated from communities like Fire Island, most of the villages, Bellport, Mastic, Shelter Island, Southold, Hempstead, all of Suffolk County, and there's probably another dozen or so that I'm not even, I can't even think of. The last is the economic impacts, and again, there's probably more than these, but I broke these out into the 4 or 5 of them. Thought it was kind of important, again, to spend some more time on illegal dumping, but a few slides back, I discussed the impact of illegal dumping. I know some of my my colleagues out here are having fits thinking about what they currently spend on monitoring, cleaning up, and enforcing of illegal dumping hotspots. In Brookhaven, we have a team of about 6 trucks. Each of those trucks are staffed with at least 2 workers, and they're assigned to litter and illegal dumping. We see a lot of commercial e-waste and metal appliances, especially when the metal market is down. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The e-waste is probably the fastest growing segment of solid waste, and it's extremely costly to dispose of correctly. You know, small businesses are either ignorant or conveniently oblivious to the costs or the environmental impact, and you know, so they'll typically hire people on the cheap. Those people just dump it illegally. You know, it's always a problem because we send guys out and it always ends up back in our res drop area where we're paying like $660 a ton. to get rid of it. I spoke a little bit about the metal market, the metal collection. You know, that's always been a problem because when the metal market's down, a lot of people, you know, they just dump it on the side of the road. We have to send crews out to pick it up, and it's even worse when the metal market's up because we dispatch crews to pick up metal, and the metal's not even there. You know, it's usually gone by some scrapper by the time we get there. We have some systems in place that we try to prevent that from happening. You know, second callbacks and things of that sort. But it's completely inefficient sometimes when you're dispatching crews all over the island for metal that's not there. So that's always been a problem. We also have what we call a heavy crew, heavy roadside crew. And this crew consists of payloaders and roll-off trucks and dump trucks, and they're assigned to cleaning up massive illegal dumping hotspots. You know, these hotspots are oftentimes filled by roll-offs and or tractor trailers that have illegally dumped, and it's funny because they always find a way to aggregate. You know, you'll find multiple loads. You'll go there when you get a call. There's supposed to be one load there. You'll go there the next day or the second day after we get it on the schedule, and you'll see 4 or 5 loads that have been illegally dumped there. So, you know, what does that mean to us, you know, in terms of economically? Well, you know, we probably spend about $1.5 million right now, and, you know, some thoughts have been that that could double or even triple if the landfill closes. I want to touch a little bit on transportation here. I know Mike White's going to speak a little bit more on transportation, so I just wanted to bring it up. You know, there was a 2014 Newsday editorial that read, and I quote, "A perfect storm of circumstances has left key facilities bulging with waste on Long Island as more waste is collected than can be processed or trucked off Long Island." You know, a year later, in 2015, another editorial titled "Long Island Looming Trash Crisis," that was printed in Newsday discussing the exact same issue. They spoke of about 5,000 tons currently being trucked off Long Island. Obviously, trucking increases our carbon emissions, and it batters the heck out of our roads and bridges. I think, you know, there's an opportunity that rail. I think rail can be part of the solution, but I don't think it's a panacea. I think regulatory issues have plagued, like the fresh pond yards, and all of Long Island Rail goes through there. Again, I think Mike has some more insight on that he'll probably be speaking to a little later on. You know, as I stated before on the job loss, you know, the Brookhaven Landfill employs about 90 people, and many of those positions would be lost through retirement, attrition, or reassignment. But there are a lot of little mom and pop operations that exist off the landfill traffic, in and out of the landfill. You know, it's easy to dismiss these small businesses, the delis, the bodegas, the repair shops, the gas stations, tires and parts suppliers. Each one in their own employs probably 5 to 10 people. So I thought it was important to put this up there. I think it's really something that we should think about. Increased consumer costs. You know, I hate to be Captain Obvious here, but, you know, local contractors would have to pass increased costs of disposal onto customers. You know, I think, you know, typical and routine household improvements like roofing projects and bathroom and kitchen renovations are going to skyrocket. When those costs increase, you know, business always seems to find a way to pass them off onto the customers. I think that's something that's going to be significant if small contractors don't have a responsible place and a cost-effective place for them to dispose of their material. You know, last one here I put down is tax increase. Again, I guess this qualifies under Captain Obvious, but up until now we've talked about the increased expenses for transportation and illegal dumping and the consumer costs. But, you know, there are 4 waste-to-energy facilities that service over 2 million people on Long Island. I think for the most part, these facility operators do a real good job of trying to develop new technologies to reduce ash and post-combustion residuals. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's always going to be ash. And what happens to that ash? Well, you know, we know that ash from 3 towns comes to the Brookhaven facility right now under contract until 2024. You know, what happens to the cost of ash disposal after the landfill closes? Who's going to bear that expense, you know? I think the facility operators and the shareholders certainly aren't going to. Most of those contracts are structured in such a way, for the most part, that they act as pass-throughs, and those pass-throughs go directly to the users of that facility, which are more often than not the residents of various towns. You know, there's no doubt that when we start tearing up roads and killing our infrastructure by adding at least 13,000 trucks to ship ash to New Jersey and Pennsylvania, the brunt of those costs are going to be passed off to the taxpayer. And worse yet, what happens if those towns or communities say they don't want it anymore? You know, that's just 4 or 5 issues that I thought were important to bring up here. I think there are probably many more impacts that I haven't even mentioned here, and I think Mike White's going to have some insight into some of those problems, as well as hopefully some solutions to those problems. So again, to my Zoom mates, thank you for listening, and to Eric and the rest of the folks at the Liblit group there, thanks for allowing me to speak on this important topic. Eric, you want
Thank you very much, Chris. I'd just like to remind everybody that if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, and then I will try to aggregate them as much as possible, and then dole the questions out to both of the speakers after Michael has spoken. So if Chris, if you could stop your sharing, and then Michael, you can share your screen. While Michael is doing that, let me tell you a little bit about Michael. Michael E. White works for Winters Brothers Waste Systems of Long Island on development and management of special projects and municipal services. Just prior to coming to Winters Brothers, Michael worked with the Office of General Counsel at Tunnel Hill Partners / Wheelabrator Technologies, focusing on solid waste rail transfer and rail-served landfills. Michael has practiced as an environmental attorney for 30 years in areas of solid waste management, water resources, wastewater management, NEPA, seeker, Superfund, and natural resources. Michael is also an adjunct faculty member at Stony Brook University's School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, SOMAS, for a graduate course in environmental management. Michael's a member of the Long Island Commission on Aquifer Protection, the Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council, and a member of and vice chair of the Long Island Regional Planning Council. He's also the former executive director of the Long Island Regional Planning Council. He's also a member of the board of New York Sea Grant and the Dean's Council of SOMAS at Stony Brook. Michael previously served as commissioner of the Commission on Sustainability in the MTA, as a member of the board of the Suffolk County Water Authority, and a member of the Long Island Regional Asheville Board. After becoming an attorney, Michael worked with several law firms on Long Island, including Jaspin Schlesinger, Rifkin Radler, and Nixon Peabody. Before becoming an attorney, Michael worked as an environmental consultant in the private sector, as a director of environmental control for the town of Huntington, as an environmentalist with the Suffolk County Department of Health Services and the Suffolk County Department of Environmental Control, and as a research scientist at the Stony Brook's Marine Sciences Research Center, now SOMAS. Michael has undergraduate degrees from Stony Brook in Earth and Space Sciences, Environmental Sciences, graduate work in Marine Sciences, and a Juris Doctorate from Touro Law School. As an aside, I first met Michael in the late 80s when Oyster Bay faced its own solid waste crisis and became the first municipality to have to ship its entire waste stream off of Long Island, at a time when there were no trucks designed to haul solid waste long distance. Michael worked for a company that was hired by the town, and as a result, he helped shape the long haul waste industry that we know today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate that. And I do remember those days. It was a difficult project, but it got off the ground and worked well. So we're going to go to my next slide here. Our agenda today was my talk called Talking Trash. Really 6 pieces to this. The current solid waste management infrastructure, a little bit of background that everybody needs to see and understand, the crisis that we're in, the closure of the Brookhaven Landfill that's really going to intensify that crisis, solid waste planning to mitigate the crisis, Why transportation of waste is a critical concern, particularly with respect to potential additional off-island transportation. And then some steps we need to look at to take in dealing with this problem. So managing solid waste on Long Island. Long Island, as most of us know, has some significant and unique challenges in managing waste. This foundation for the challenge is the Long Island Landfill Law, which was adopted in 1983, which prohibits landfilling of municipal solid waste on Long Island. Absolutely necessary to protect our groundwater aquifer, which is our sole source drinking water supply. MSW generated on Long Island is disposed of on-island facilities. We call them energy from waste facilities, or it's trucked off-island for disposal at landfills. On Long Island, solid waste management is achieved through a really public-private partnership of industry and municipalities. And anybody who has worked for municipalities or has been in this industry knows how important that is, that teamwork exists. So our current infrastructure on island, MSW, as I mentioned just a minute ago, is either burned or exported. 4 energy from waste facilities on the island: Hempstead Covanta, Huntington Smithtown Covanta, Babylon Covanta, and Islip Covanta. Thank you, Covanta. Each facility primarily manages residential MSW generated within those localities, with the exception of Hempstead Covanta, which also handles the MSW from the town of Brookhaven, and the Babylon Covanta facilities, which in addition to handling Babylon, handles MSW from Southhold. These energy from waste facilities handle a limited amount of commercial waste from commercial haulers when there indeed is capacity. So, current infrastructure. Thousands of tons of waste is shipped off the island for disposal each day. Thousands of tons of waste. The following municipalities utilize off-island options for managing MSW off-island. Oyster Bay, which is the project that Eric spoke of when we first met, North Hempstead, Riverhead, Southampton, East Hampton, and the waste from the commercial haulers, which I mentioned, some of which can get into energy from waste facilities, but the majority of is shipped off Long Island. The roadway and bridge infrastructure that we know about on Long Island and around the city of New York and the metropolitan area is highly stressed and obviously aging. So this trucking approach presents ever-increasing costs and certainly a heavy carbon footprint. So in addition to the MSW, we have other wastes that are of concern: construction and demolition debris, ash from the energy from waste facilities, which Chris was mentioning, yard waste, organic waste, storm debris, dredge spoils, medical waste, electronic waste, hazardous waste, and recyclables. We're going to focus, as I've talked about a little bit at MSW, we're going to focus on a little bit more on MSW, construction and demolition debris, and to some extent on the energy from waste ash as well. So, construction and demolition debris is generated by construction, demolition, and renovation activities. It's usually processed to sort out a recoverable recycled material, but on-island disposal of CED is limited, first to the Brookhaven Landfill in the Outbank, and the only other real landfill that's taken any considerable amount is the 110 Sand Company in Melville. Islip still takes a very limited amount at their landfill as well. So for the most part, off-island disposal of C&D goes to landfills via trucks, but this is one waste that is presently being shipped off by rail. There's 2 existing facilities on Long Island, and that C&D waste is being shipped by rail to landfills in Ohio. So the crisis. The amount of waste generated on Long Island is ever increasing. Our population is still growing. The per capita waste generation is increasing. We've calculated about 4.6 pounds of MSW per person per day, and then you can add on the C&D and other waste on top of that. So with respect to the Brookhaven Landfill, closure in 2024. Chris can probably update these numbers, but we're calling the current volume to the Brookhaven Landfill at about 720,000 tons per year of C&D waste. and about 350,000 tons per year of ash from energy from waste facilities. So after the Brookhaven landfill closes, there will be only one landfill, the 11010 company on Long Island, and no landfill for energy from waste facility ash, with the exception of Babylon, which in addition to having the Babylon Covanta plant, does have its own ash monofill. More on the crisis. The additional demand for trucks to transport and dispose of C&D off island will further stress that current infrastructure that I spoke about and clearly disrupt market economics. Costs are going to increase for all generators of waste, municipalities, homeowners, commercial establishments, institutions. So to address the Brookhaven landfill closure, the market needs, and this is just some ideas that we're already coming up with, obviously more recycling. That's been a challenge recently, but really coming back, and we need to really continue to focus on that. Greater improved transportation infrastructure for off-island disposal, with a particular attention to more freight rail services. And consider the expansion of rail transport for C&D, which is presently going on to some extent, but also for MSW. And if it becomes necessary, energy from waste ash. Steps to address the crisis. So these are just some ideas that we've been coming up with, and obviously we need to compile more and have a lot more ideas added to this. Coordinate and plan for the closure of the Brookhaven landfill. Encourage the Long Island Regional Planning Council to review and issue recommendations for managing waste. We've recently had the opportunity to take what we call our Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council and bring it over to the Regional Planning Council. So we're going to be continuing to work on that initiative. Hold a series of workshops to prioritize the environmental issues and act on recommendations. This just adds on to the communications that we need to have with all sectors that's involved in solid waste. Plan for and develop increased infrastructure. We work, and I've worked with Long Island Railroad and New York Atlantic Railroad. New York Atlantic Railroad is the freight provider on the Long Island MTA service, and that's clearly a system that we have to continue to work with and hopefully expand. Budget for higher costs. Chris said the same thing. We look at what happened in New York City when the Fresh Skills landfill was closed. The costs, you know, there's a city that has no disposal capacity, ships out all of its waste. And this cost impact will be to all businesses, municipalities, and of course all residents. Increase recycling efforts. Some on-island solutions, particularly with respect to opportunities for glass processing. Long Island has an opportunity to do that. We should see that go forward. Added benefit for job creation. You know, we hear about the idea of the green infrastructure, the green economy, the recycling efforts, particularly with other glass processing and other commodities. That's an opportunity for job creation. So in addition to that, we have to continue to look for and hopefully foster some legislative assistance, specifically perhaps some assistance to assist the Brookhaven landfill closure and the transition, providing grant money for regional solid waste planning, and the continued efforts to penalize illegal dumping. And this also follows through with additional regulatory efforts on some of the similar issues, aggressive investigation and prosecute illegal dumping, and create a framework that supports efforts to manage waste environmentally sound and cost effective. Again, going back to the recycling and more transportation options. We do see this year some legislation with respect to illegal dumping. We hope that gets through the legislature. So the last thing I want to mention is something that really connects to what Chris has said, the potential game changers. A major storm. If you look at the issues of the statistics and the comments that Chris made, we have to have disposal capacity in case those events happen again. And it's more likely than not that they will. So that's pretty much my ideas. Welcome questions. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Michael. Again, I remind everybody to, if you have questions, please put them into the chat box, and I will try to, consolidate them and get them to the appropriate speakers. But just to start out, since we don't have too many questions at the present time, I'm wondering if you could, Michael, can you get into, do you have information as to whether, how many sites and how many states are right now willing to accept waste from out of their states, specifically from Long Island?
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly, there's a number of landfills. It's not so much anymore not accepting waste, because clearly there's an interstate commerce issue involved there. They sort of have to do that, but it's a question of whether they will or they want to and they have the capacity. And the real issue becomes with communities, there are various taxes, potential community benefits that have to be provided to those communities. So again, I think it goes to the point where there's a lot of potential cooperation out there, but the costs are going to be an issue.
Okay. A couple other questions have come in. One is, how do you think we should address contamination rates in recycling when you say we need to increase recycling?
Well, I know, go ahead, Chris, you're on that.
I just say that, you know, the contamination issue, it comes down to the menu items that you can recycle. You know, look, we've been down this road for a long time now, and it always comes back to there's only a certain amount of valuable commodities, and by minimizing that until consistent markets exist, you're just spinning your wheels. I mean, just to say something's recycled doesn't mean it's recyclable. So contamination has to be dealt with through education. In Brookhaven here, we do an awful lot of education. Over the last 3 years or so, the supervisor has invested an awful lot into the social media aspect of education. We do different videos each and every week specific to particular commodities and contamination. We try to address it at certain times of the year. You seem to get more spring cleaning. You tend to get more because people think everything's recyclable. So I think, you know, through education and involvement with the community, I think that's the best way to deal with contamination.
Chris, another question came in regarding recycling. Has contamination rates in recycling decreased since Brookhaven went back to dual stream?
Yeah, again, I would say they absolutely are. You know, we have a number, we work with our partners over at Winter Brothers to try to vet out where the contamination is coming from. We're fortunate we have, you know, 35 contract bid areas. We try to monitor each load as they come in, and then you can specifically, you know, kind of identify where the material is coming from. Again, it's a lot less since we've had single stream. I think when we were in the midst of single stream, especially when the markets tanked, you know, I think people they thought that everything was recyclable. They were putting everything in the single stream can.
Michael, you spoke about the downfall of having to ship out waste, you know, off of the island, the cost, the impact on carbon emissions, et cetera. One thing that hasn't been discussed is marine transport. I know the Islip garbage barge. I mean, I think that you know, put a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But is there any talk about marine transport? Is that feasible? Maybe you can address that.
So absolutely, Eric. I think the time has come to revisit that as a potential option. We've all grown out of the disaster of the Islip garbage barge. But when we look at that, and we are on an island, there really should be an opportunity to use that method. The problem is going to become is who's going to want it near their waterfront, or on their waterfront, or near their docks. So that's going to be an issue. And the other thing is you have to look at the other side. So from rail, we're working with a number of landfills who are rail served. The idea is you need to have landfills then that would be barge served. Or you're barging it to somewhere and you're putting it back on trucks or rail and handling it again. So the answer is yes, Eric. I think we need to pursue that. By the way, when we talked about storm debris, in Sandy, a great amount of storm debris from Nassau County was shipped out by barge. It was shipped up the Hudson, put back on trucks, and taken to a landfill. Again, that double handling is not the best method, but it shows it can be done.
Okay. Has there been any, another question came in, is whether there's any discussions on building an industrial composting facility?
Well, I don't know, Chris, you want to talk about that?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that we have the Long Island compost facility that's directly across from us. They handle an awful lot of the yard waste debris. I know there's always been talk about and plans for a food wasting compost facility, but in terms of an actual industrial compost facility, I'm not aware of any locally here. That's not to say that there aren't something in the works elsewhere that I'm not aware of.
I think it's going to be also covered, Eric, in a future segment on our symposiums here.
Okay. All right. In terms of the contaminants in ash, is there a general profile of the contaminants, and what are there beneficial uses for those contaminants?
Okay, Chris, do you want to talk about that, or I can talk a little bit about the ash?
Well, I stated in my presentation earlier, Covanta controls the 4 waste energy facilities out here, and I've known those folks for a number of years, and they're continually trying to find technologies and ways to reduce the amount of ash by removing as much recyclables or any commodity that they can take out of the ash and develop a market for it. Those guys are like pit bulls on a piece of red meat when it comes to that, because obviously there's a cost associated with the disposal of ash. So, they do a great job of doing it. I think it's something that's ongoing. I don't think it's something that's going to happen overnight. We're hopeful that it happens, soon, because, hey, look, the sooner they can develop that stuff, the better off it is for everybody. But there's always going to be a need for some type of disposal of the residuals. But perhaps that's another Waste on Wednesday talk. But like I said, those guys are constantly trying to figure out ways to reduce the amount of ash by removing metals, precious metals, ferrous, non-ferrous. They do a pretty good job of it.
Another question came in that said the main driver of illegal dumping is the economic incentive. And Chris, you addressed it. We might see an increase in illegal dumping. And as waste costs go higher, there's going to be even more incentive for illegal dumping. Besides strengthening the penalties, are there any governmental plans, such as subsidizing disposal costs to keep that cost down and keep that potential down?
I can't speak of subsidizing disposal costs, but I can tell you that we spend an awful lot of money in monitoring hotspots. Again, the supervisor is resilient when it comes to putting inspectors and law investigators out. When we come across an area that's a hotspot, we'll investigate it. We have people that literally sift through the garbage to try to find where it originated. That stuff's really kind of, the forensics part of it, if you will, that stuff's really costly, but it's something that we feel is very important. When we have areas that are hotspots, we notify other law enforcement agencies and regulatory agencies. Brookhaven's unique, where there's a lot of rural areas out there. We have two roads, the Sunrise Highway and the Expressway, which is very easy. These guys are off the road, dumping and back on the road, and as long as it takes you to pump a load out or to dump a load, that's never going to change. There's just an awful lot of real estate. It's only going to get worse when the landfill closes, when there's no convenient and affordable disposal option for them. I can't imagine it getting any better.
Getting back to the ash issue, Newsday has reported that Brookhaven may advance a plan to turn the landfill into a regional ash facility. Can you provide us an update on that process and plan?
Well, I can tell you that any enhanced capacity for ash on Long Island would benefit not only the town of Brookhaven, but over 2.5 million residents. But I think a facility like that has the support of the governor. I think we were successful. Again, the supervising town board was successful in winning a consolidation grant, and that was a significant component of it. But any talk of additional capacity like that is really premature at this part. So much in its infancy.
think I may have covered all the questions that have come in. Anybody else has any further questions, please put them in the chat box. A couple of minutes. Oh. If not, I want to.
Eric, I could.
Yeah.
I was going to say, add a little historical perspective to that question on the regional ash fill. As you had mentioned, I was on the Long Island Regional Ash Fill Board, which was an entity that was established by state legislation way back in the early 90s. When the waste energy facilities were being planned, it was, what are we going to do with the waste? And we're not going to truck it to Buffalo. So there was a state initiative and a generic environmental impact statement done to take a look at where could we dispose of this material, obviously with all the safeguards and environmental protections that would be available. And as it turns out, the Brookhaven Landfill was the place that was selected by that initiative. Yeah, it's history, and there's Chris pointing out that it's still, you know, up for consideration.
Michael, you had mentioned that glass is a major component that maybe we should be able to recycle. What can we do to advance a glass recycling facility on the island?
Well, I do know that that's going to be covered very solidly in the next round. But there are opportunities, and we've actually seen some municipalities like Rockland County who have actually fostered that and produced a product. So I think Will's Flower and others are going to cover that next round.
Yeah, Eric, if I may chime on that, because that's one of the things I was going to speak of, because I know Mike mentioned it in his presentation as well, and how we should be establishing local recycling to deal with our own recyclables on the island, and glass being an important one. And, you know, we talk an awful lot about glass and year in and year out, and we've been dealing with this for an awful long time. But the truth of the matter is, you know, we need some help in developing these markets. You know, New York State DOT has the ability of using this stuff as aggregate for drainage projects and sub-base for asphalt and things of that sort. But right now it's kind of, you know, a voluntary use. You know, we need a little more support from the state in terms of mandating that use in public works projects. And then we need release of some performance liability, so the contractors feel comfortable using it without fear that they're going to be held accountable for a product that we all know is going to work. I mean, the science is there. Science says it works. We've actually done little projects in-house that prove it's going to work. But again, I think we need some support from the state in mandating the use of that material, because you can build all the facilities if you want. If you don't have a disposal option or a recycling option for it, I should say, it's just going to mound up. It's just the way it is.
Okay. I'd like to remind everybody that this is the first of a series of Waste on Wednesdays. They're not every Wednesday, but every few Wednesdays. And our next one is going to be on August 5th, and the topic will be the state of recycling on Long Island. So I'd invite you all to stay tuned for that one. It seems to be a continuing topic of major importance to every municipality and all solid waste leaders. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. This was new to us, and I think it was successful. We had up to 62 people attending. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.